Thank you, Milena. Can you hear me at the back? Am I the only non-Bulgarian speaker in this room? Okay, so I apologize, you're all speaking in English, okay? It's the first
No,
thing.
you are not alone.
Oh,
There is also the speaker.
Oh, good. Okay, so I don't feel so bad, okay? Yes, so my name is Mahendra Mahey. I'm English. I was born in England, of Indian heritage. I think I have a very complex relationship with British colonialism because of my own history. But I'm going to be talking, as Milena said, about... thank you, Valeria, for your excellent presentation. One thing I wanted to say, if we'd got round to me, is I really want to work with you, actually. I really like sort of looking at alternative metrics. I have an opinion about metrics generally, measuring things and stuff. But I'm going to... So my presentation is going to be a little bit different, okay? I'm going to be looking at digital cultural heritage in galleries, libraries, archives and museums. And there's a big movement to publish this as open. Sometimes they use the word data, sometimes they do not, okay? And there's an interesting philosophical discussion there. I remember talking to a curator in a library and saying, do you realize these 10,000 digitized manuscript images, that's a data set? No, it's not a data set. So we kind of had this discussion, but I've been trying to, in terms of my work, implement this kind of thinking, which is, I think, also a mindset shift in many cultural heritage organizations. I wear several hats. I think I have too many hats, actually. I'm Milena's PhD student at the University of Strathclyde. My home is Estonia. So I'm used to speaking in a room where I'm the only non-Estonian speaker. I do research at the Estonian National Museum, looking at the social impact of working with digital cultural heritage. I'm a research data analyst at Tallinn University. I'm also working on a project which is called the Estonian Research and Cultural Data Infrastructure Project. So I'm going to sort of I'm going to talk specifically about digital cultural heritage. So I'm not going to sort of go into many areas of open science. Some of them are similar, but that's going to be my focus. And just sort of as a sort of indication, I don't know if you can, whoops, what's happened there? Okay, that's an image of me. It's actually made up of 500 images of digital cultural heritage. Okay, so if you zoomed in, you'd see that my face is actually made up of images of digital cultural heritage, and that's just a very simple example of reuse. Okay, but my point is using digital cultural heritage is, in a way, you're retelling a story. Okay, in very simple terms, you take the heritage, you remix it in some way, and then you create a new narrative. It could be research, it could be art. You know, but this is the jump that takes place. So, I'm going to talk a bit about me. I'm going to be talking about how easy is it to trace reuse of digital cultural heritage. And then I'm going to also talk about a schema for describing digital heritage use, digital cultural heritage use, and maybe there'll be sort of a chance for some questions afterwards. So, a little bit about me. I have worked in several countries. I'm from England, so I am English. But often people ask me the question, oh, your English is so good, where are you from? And I say, I'm from England. No, they say, where are you from? I say, I'm from Wolverhampton in England. And I think something happens in people's brains. They're like computer crashes. There's maybe blue screen. So I get that quite a lot in Estonia as well, actually. But I've worked in Poland, Estonia, United Kingdom. I've worked in different sectors: schools, colleges, universities, libraries, and museums. And I'm quite old, so I'm getting near to the end of my career, I suppose. But I kind of want to talk about the work that I did with cultural heritage. So I used to run a project, well, it wasn't not just a project, a service called British Library Labs. So I joined the British Library in 2012, and basically the aim of the project was to connect cultural heritage, digital cultural heritage, with people. Okay? That was essentially what the project was. And I think the idea was to tell the world what digital cultural heritage there is at the British Library, and because of the British's colonial history, there's a lot, right, from all over. And I think this is important because I want to say this at the beginning. I think the reason this lab was set up, the lab was set up for the purpose of getting people to connect with the digital cultural heritage, was the library had spent a lot of money with digitization and capturing born digital. So they'd spent all this money, but the question was, who's actually using it? Was it gathering digital dust? And if you've worked in digital preservation, you may know, if you store digital objects on spinning hard drives, you actually get bit rot. So sometimes you then can't access the digital thing because of the mechanics. But basically, it was the first national library in the world to have a lab. And I ran it for nearly 9 years. So I'm going to talk about that experience in the context here. So just to sort of say, over the nearly 9 years, we supported and showcased over 300 projects, working with different groups, researchers, artists, entrepreneurs, and staff. We held competitions and awards and several other sort of different kinds of projects. The lab started to position itself more towards data science. We were doing machine learning when it wasn't trendy and sexy like it is now, or AI. We were doing very early experiments. And the final thing, which I'm very proud of, is I helped to start building a community around the world of something called GLAM labs. So GLAM is galleries, libraries, archives, and museums labs. So in a way, what we were doing is we were bringing experimental thinking into organizations that are quite conservative, quite risk averse. Anybody from a GLAM here? Okay. So this is going to be a provocation to you, maybe, right? Actually, it was trying to bring experimental thinking into these environments, and actually, what it was about was what I realized after working many years. Actually, staff within these organizations are experimental. Okay, they just don't always verbalize it. Okay. But the value of risk, not taking risks, it is probably because of the mindset of keeping things safe, okay, which is understandable. But the lab here was very much about expanding use, getting the things published, and then getting people to do stuff with it. Okay, so this is the GLAM Labs book. If you Google Open a GLAM Lab, you'll notice Milena's one of the authors here. I'm one of the authors here.
No point in Bulgaria, no.
Sorry?
No point in Bulgaria.
Yeah, we need some we need some examples, okay? The GLAM Labs community started in 2018. It's still there. We recently had an event in Edinburgh, 1 week ago actually. And, but in 2018, we established the community, and trying to do innovation in a conservative organization is a very lonely experience, okay? You often feel very isolated, often not understood, and I think for me, one of the main reasons to have this community was as like a support group or a therapy group, okay? To be able to say, this is what happens in my organization, and then they would say, oh, this happens in my organization too. So it's like not just me, it's not my doing, it's the culture. To understand that is a very powerful thing. Open a GLAM Lab is a book that we wrote in a week. 16 of us locked ourselves in a hotel room in Qatar, and we couldn't leave until we had written a book. Okay? And it was, Milena's laughing. It was a terrifying experience, but also for me one of the best experiences I've ever had professionally. And the idea was, how do you set up a lab? How do you run it and maintain it, even close it? And this was this is the context. Okay, so I always use this slide because I think this is what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to understand how digital cultural heritage is used. And actually, it's about humanity. It's about humans. Although we could have a very interesting discussion that probably the primary user of digital cultural heritage is now AI algorithms. Okay? But I think these are the things that we have to deal with. This is a quote from Edward Osborne Wilson, a sociobiologist. Basically, as humans, we think we're sophisticated, but actually we're Stone Age. We have Stone Age emotions. As much as complicated as we think we are, we're just basically emotional beings. Most of us work in medieval institutions, okay? Yet we've been given this godlike technology, and I'm calling that computing and the internet. So we're having to sort of deal with all of this. And I think this is often the sort of things that I often have to deal with. So, I remember I said, I use this metaphor. Basically, the work that I was doing was trying to connect audience interests with digital collections. Okay? These some statistics from the British Library. Only 4% of the physical collections in the British Library were digitized at that time. 4%. But there's 180 million physical items. It's a big number. Only 9% of those items are books. Okay, so it gives you an idea of scale. Trying to do this, make this connection, I suppose it's a bit like dating. It's complicated. Okay. In order to understand how digital reuse works, I use this example of the digital collection. I'm not going to go through all of these things here, but basically, let's say this is a digital collection. How this came into existence, there are several reasons. Okay? Who paid for the digitization? What was the political context when this was digitized? Why was it digitized? Is it born digital? Is there any metadata? Did anybody decide on the licensing or not? Okay? All these things have an impact on trying to make digital collections published. Okay? I think the most important thing that I always used to highlight was this one, is is there a human being in the organization who can tell me about this collection? Okay? That is always the critical factor, actually. And all of this is human. Okay? Most of it is human. Okay? Nearly all of it. And that means humans are biased, they are emotional, they give you a particular view on things. Okay? And what was it, the famous quote? History is written by the victors. Okay? So there's also issues about colonial bias, cultural bias, and this is particularly pertinent at the moment. For example, I work with some colleagues in Ukraine, where a lot of their cultural heritage is being rewritten by Russia. Okay? So history is this changing thing, very biased and very sort of susceptible to change. And I'm just going to just bring these up quick because I just wanted to, whoops. This was the pattern of how people worked with the data. Basically, the data was published. People then looked at the data. Sometimes people suggested ideas of what to do with the data before looking at the data. So they saw, oh, this has 100,000 manuscripts, they didn't read anything else, I want to do this. Only when they looked inside the data, they realized, oh, I can't do this, I can't follow this research question because the data is not there. So I always say the first part of access and reuse is have a date with the data. So I said it's a bit like dating, okay? Actually take the data out for a coffee. I'm not saying, ask them lots of questions, find out a little bit more about them, and then you realize, okay, this will work, this will not work. But this was the typical pattern. Once they have had the date, they form a question, and then they usually asked or proposed an idea of what to do with the data. And this was really important, especially working with academics, was to give them a hard deadline and say, you have 3 weeks to do this research journey. Okay? Which means they didn't have very much time. Sometimes it was 6 weeks. But the idea was the human brain can either deal really well with constraints or not. But we were trying to create constraints. Why is that doing that? So this is the problem with publishing openly. If you use principles of open science, if you publish data openly, users are not obliged to tell you what they did with the data. Agreed? Yep. You can ask them, before you download this data, can you please tell us what you're going to do with it? How many people are going to do that?
They have attribution licenses, but they're still difficult.
It's not. We're all humans here. How many of us would do that? We wouldn't, would we? Right? You have this dilemma. You put stuff out under open principles, and then you really want to know what people have done with it. Now you have things like, I call them proxy metrics, like downloads. So somebody's downloaded it, squirreled it. We don't actually know what they've done with it. They could have just kept it on their machine or stored it on a hard drive. We'll never know. How will we know?
If the data were shared or cited with the DOI,
So for example, if they share examples of what they've done, if you ask them,
or usually they do something meaningful that people tend to brag about it, so you
Yeah.
kind of find out.
Yeah. Exactly, right? So if I'm going to sort of talk about this, tapping into human motivations, okay? You usually get to find out about it because they tell you about it, or they brag about it, or they publish something. That's how it works.
Actually, the best way for now, I think it's Kaggle. Kaggle, like a platform for data and data mining. And lots of my students from master programs, they use it the platform for download the data and do some tasks on the data.
Yeah, the Kaggle platform's been around for quite a long time, actually.
Yeah.
And definitely one platform. If you're an institution, do you care what people are doing with your data? I'm sort of looking at my colleague.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, I have a very good example of how we can find what people do. Now, we had some years ago, something happened. A man downloaded a lot of files of digitized books, old books, from our library, from the Library of Bulgarian Academy of Sciences, from the National Library, and made his own digital library.
Yep.
That's how we found how our data. I had never thought about manuscripts like data, but you're right.
Was the digital library better than your digital library?
They just download the data and share it public.
Yes.
Okay.
And it was not a good experience for us.
Okay. It's an interesting discussion I think we're going to have into that.
Yes.
Okay. So this is my little bit of a provocation to Altmetrics, but we'll come back to this later. I'm not going to I think you covered it very well. Okay. I think Altmetrics give us some evidence of attention, but we need more to find out about actual use. Agreed? Okay. So we can show the visibility, but the quality of the interaction is not a given. What you said about quantity versus quality,
Yes.
right? It can be cited, so sometimes it has a DOI, but how is it actually used? Sometimes citation really, really helps to do that. It's open, but what use is the impact? For me, metrics are whispers, but not an absolute, I don't know, that's my way of perceiving. I don't know if you agree with that, right? One example I can give is a project that we did at the beginning of the lab. It was using digitized books, and one of the problems with the lab at the time, a lab in a national library is an alien concept, actually. If I had called the lab a service, it would have been different. But because it was a lab, people said, well, National Library shouldn't have a lab. It's not the right home for it. But the lab allows you to do experiments. So what we did was, we had a collection of 65,000 digitized books from the 19th century. We thought, so this tells you a little bit about the mindset of lab people. What's the worst thing that we could do to that collection? Destroy them, right? But we would never destroy books. But what we did do was we cut out all the images from the books algorithmically, and we published them on Flickr. 1 million images it was. And the idea of publishing them on Flickr had an API, you could tag. Also, you could go back to the original catalog record where the book was. This was, I think, we published in 2013. 18 million tags have been added, 8 billion views. These are kind of impressive metrics, right? Sort of, yeah, right? But actually, The reality is the management, our senior managers, because they're the ones who give you the money to continue doing the lab, they wanted stories. They wanted short stories which they could maybe brag to their friends, right? So here is some statistics. This is like the first year of when we launched the images onto Flickr. And what I'm saying is, measures clearly show something is happening. And I say something. We don't actually know. We know they're being accessed, but we don't know what's being done with them. Okay? And I think humans, as humans, you want stories, don't you? We're programmed to listen to stories. So, how to capture stories? Okay? And I think the first thing is, going back to this quote, is focus on the human. Okay? We had a sort of philosophy, humans are our first users. Okay? What makes them tick? They want to brag. They want to tell the world. They want to tell stories. They want to emotionally connect.
They want attention also.
Sorry?
They want attention also.
They want attention, especially now in attention economy.
Scarce.
Yeah. So like, I don't know who the lady is who's the intern there. Sorry, I'm picking on her. But like, what you want now is you want to have something on your phone, like you were doing now, right? Where it's like, oh, okay, this is kind of, maybe you have 30 seconds, right? So this is the world we're living in, right? So, obviously in academia, there's one route is publication, but what other methods are there? Okay? So I'm sort of arguing that finding reuse can be a bit like fishing in the sea. Okay? Who's a fish? Who fishes? Anybody fish here? Okay. Sometimes you have good days, sometimes you have bad days, right? Okay? That's sometimes how it can be, trying to find reuse stories. All the metrics that you were talking about, like blog mentions and things, they're all cool ideas. I 100% support you. But it can be quite difficult. So, one of the things that I did very early on is how can I convince people to tell their stories? Okay? It was very simple. If you tell your story, you might win a prize. That's it. Really simple. We will give you glory. We will give you a spotlight. You can come to our ceremony, which will be like the Oscars. I'm serious. Did it work? What do you think? Didn't work? It worked. Well, what we said was, tell us what you did. We will highlight this. We had over 300 projects that were highlighted. And basically, I think the main motivation was people thought, if I write my story, there was like terms and conditions at the bottom. If you write your story, you must share it. Okay? Only one person didn't want to share it. Okay? Everybody else did. I think it's probably like fishing. There are 300 projects there. There are probably thousands of projects we don't know about. Okay? But the most important thing is we have some projects. We use this to show our managers, this is what happens when you open up your data. So, for example, one story is, hang on if I go back. I don't know why it's doing that, right? This is David Normal, an artist who took the images from the books, cut them out, made them into collages, made them into paintings, exhibited them at Burning Man, and then exhibited them at the library. This is in the library. That's a Burning Man. I have so many metrics about that. How many people came to the launch event, how many people came to the exhibition. We also had an app where you could walk around the painting, and when it found an image that it recognized, it would take you back to the page in the book where that image came from. Okay? This is Mario Klingerman. I'm using visual stories right now. There are lots of research stories. He did one of the very first experiments with AI. He used AI to curate images. So these are 44 men who look 44, right? This is pictures that he found using an algorithm. If there's a hat on the ground, something bad is going to happen, right? He has now become a very famous AI artist. Okay, that was his journey. So, my argument is that GLAMs need to be better at systematically measuring the impact of their reuse of digital heritage. GLAMs don't always document reuse of their digital cultural heritage. They don't always see the value. They rely on proxy metrics like views and downloads, but that does not say much about impact. And they don't tend to publish these. So you know the guy who did the book, the new digital library, did he write about it online?
Yes.
He did, okay.
Yes.
So that's good. So many of them don't. There are some schemes, like if you Google dcraft and indices, they look at the social impact. I haven't got time to go into that now. Also, you've heard of the collections as data and data sheets for cultural heritage. They allow for a more systematic way to publish data sets, cultural heritage data sets. But basically, when we were doing this work, me and my colleagues found that there was a gap in the research. So, is it possible to create a new schema, a metadata schema, that measures reuse or captures reuse? So, we've just submitted an article, but I want to talk about it a little bit. Basically, we used an abductive research design. We looked at the literature on reuse, impact, and metadata frameworks. We analyzed 132 reuse examples, 11 user journeys, 67 interviews. So this is very qualitative kind of research. And basically we prototyped a framework, but this is the framework. We've developed a schema that sort of looks at reuse from these perspectives. So organization and context, heritage and assets, purpose and process, users and engagement, nature of use and availability, impact and sustainability. These are some of the questions that each of these categories answer. So for example, impact. Core questions: what value and longevity of result? Outcomes: what outcomes are there? Well, who are the beneficiaries? How is it maintained? Indicators: learning, identity, self-identity, cultural identity, ongoing support. Also, it can support evaluation. But the idea here is it possible to describe reuse in a framework, in a systematic way? So, we've basically got a bunch of questions. I won't go into them now, and you probably can't see it anyway, but we looked at 4 examples, and then we used the framework to see if it can answer those questions. We looked at Estonian Book 500 competition. So I'm based in Estonia. This was a competition which celebrated the 500th year of the first printed book in Estonia. A pro game jam, Jupyter notebooks looking at computational reuse, and basically from those examples we started to sort of validate the framework. What we found was that reuse is a socio-technical process. It's kind of logical, but that's what it is, right? But it's not just simply access to data. There are lots of measurements you can take. Open licensing, supporting skills, and mediation encourage reuse. Frameworks support evaluation, planning, and sustainability. So the idea is, if you have a database or a data set of reuses, you can use that to train models that help publish new digital collections. That's the idea. So, I'm coming back to Altmetrics. So they're definitely important. They contribute to understanding reuse. There's a load of measures. I think Valeria kind of mentioned them in her presentation. But I also feel there needs to be a qualitative approach to match this. So the schema, we're proposing that it should be used as a planning tool, where you start to build up a whole set of examples. You can also then use it as a way to create metadata for new collections, and you can then link to some of these examples. And what I've also learned is that many institutions still don't have policies and processes for digital reuse. This is like a big gap that's missing. So, apologies, I could have gone in many different directions, but that's me. So, thank you. Questions? Maybe I think we go on this side of the table. Okay, you can.
So, because Milena had to leave, so I guess I'll take over. I have a bunch of questions, but I'm not going to ask them all. I have one which is I care a lot about. Do you have any feedback and any stories to tell about reuse on Wikimedia Commons and on Wikipedia? So I'm trying to build an argument here, basically to convince people and institutions that if they open up their data, we'll give them glory because Wikipedia is indexed. They'll see a lot of reuse, and also they will have a lot of volunteers to help them make sense of their data because they'll get free work. This is kind of the argument that I'm trying to do.
Just to tell you a little story, do you remember the Flickr images?
Yeah.
We approached Wikimedia first about those images, and Wikimedia refused.
Why?
Because they said that these images don't have any metadata.
Okay.
Right? Which kind of, you can understand.
Kind of makes sense.
So what we did was, we thought, okay, actually first what we did was we approached our IT department, right? Our IT department said, oh, we need to have a committee of this, and excuse my English, I thought, fuck that, okay? I haven't got time for that, okay? Sorry for swearing. I didn't say that actually, but that's how I felt. I thought, I haven't got time. We need to get the data out, okay? So Flickr allowed tagging, had an API. We have subsequently, put many collections through on Wikimedia, and we've also used Wikidata. So I have plenty of examples. And I'm kind of connected, so if you're connected to the Wikidata, Wikimedia community, I'm kind of connected as well. So there's been loads of studies and reports and stuff. I think I've been interviewed for some of them, and I sort of give some examples as well.
Okay, great. So I propose we continue with the tour de table
exercise.
So who's next?
If you could give me your name and your role.
Karina, I'm a researcher in this institute, working with digital cultural heritage, and my question is a bit human. In the context of a previous presentation where quality and quantity was my biggest problem in research, in digital cultural heritage context, I have a question. What was the biggest obstacle in your work, including in research context, to convince GLAM people to get involved into this data journey? Because data, they don't understand very well.
I like using metaphor stories, right? At the beginning, when I joined, I said, do you have a list? And nobody could give me a definitive answer on that question. Because I wanted a list of what you have. So that was the first thing. Because how can you promote something if you don't know what it is, right? Next was...
they have stories.
Sorry?
They
So
have
yeah, no, you're right.
stories.
So some of them had anecdotes, like, oh, there was a guy who did this, but nothing was written down, right? But there were some stories, but the mindset was not, oh, I need to record this, right? So I'm going to be very honest with you. One of the motivations for capturing the stories, it was like, humans don't do that. They just get it out, right? But I thought, this is only a 2-year project, because at the beginning it was only 2 years. I need examples to show to management. So I deliberately made people document, right? How can I get them to document? They need some reward. This was the prize. It wasn't a lot of money, like £50 sometimes. Sometimes it was a bit more. But you know what the best thing I did was I started to give prizes to staff. Staff in the organization, because they were doing incredible work and nobody was seeing it, right? Nobody was seeing it. So, by giving them acknowledgement, by giving them visibility, they also became the lab's cheerleaders, supporters, right? And one cataloger, she has quite a, I suppose on the outside it looks like a boring job, but actually she was doing amazing things with cataloguing, amazing things. She even tried to convert catalogue records into music. So if the records were from East Africa, for example, algorithms would convert the text into East African music. She was doing it. So she got an award, and she said, nobody has ever recognized me before. I've been in this institution 20 years, nobody has ever recognized me. This was really powerful. So other challenges, managers don't really understand statistics. I'm sorry. So maybe some do, most of them don't. They want stories. My boss from the top of the library, he wanted me, he said, Mahendra, have you got another story that I can put into a slide, because I'm giving an international presentation at an international conference. Okay? Do you remember the story about David Normal, the artist? Nobody wanted to touch that project. I was trying to get money for it. Nobody. I went to the chief executive. I said, could you help me? Everybody thinks I'm crazy, right? 2 weeks later.
Is it the AI thing?
No. The sort of David Normal Burning Man artworks, right? He basically, 2 weeks later, he was launching his vision for the library, and he said, in the summer, we will have the artwork of David Normal in the piazza. The next day, people were knocking on my door. How can we help you, Mahendra? How can we help you? Yeah. So, and I think for me, the biggest challenge for me was when I joined the library, I felt this is not a place for someone like me. I come from a working class background. I'm a family of immigrants. My parents are not educated. And I remember walking through the door and thinking, I don't belong here, right? When I got the job, I thought, okay, what's the one thing I'm going to change? I want more people like me in this working here and doing things. That was a motivation when I was depressed because nobody wanted to work with me at the beginning, where I thought, okay, start again tomorrow. I remember going to a university, and at the beginning, 2012, 2013, we couldn't put 4 terabytes on the web. It was too difficult. So I put it into a network area storage device, like this, heavy box, put it in a suitcase, went to the university, set up a wireless access device so people could explore it. That's how I provided access. I remember everybody said, oh, this is so cool, this is so cool, but nobody wanted to work with it. Coming back on the train, a professor of Latin American studies said, oh, you've got some interesting books. I could like to work with that. And I said, I'll send you a spreadsheet of all the titles. Oh, I don't do spreadsheets. So I printed out the spreadsheets and posted them to her. She highlighted them with a marker pen. I made a data set and I gave it to her. She got funded projects. So, you know, at the beginning it's hard, right? That was quite a long time ago. But what I've noticed, for example, in Estonia is a young country. There seems to be a lot of interest in cultural heritage right now. A pattern I saw maybe 20 years ago is kind of very fresh in Estonia. And maybe, you know, I see there's many opportunities, I think, in Bulgaria. But the thing is for humans to connect and tell new stories. This is what I believe. I'm a really strong believer in that. But there were other challenges. It took 8.5 years to get permanent funding. 8.5 years. So you can imagine.
A lot of work to do.